upon his crucifixion. In so doing, they have learned how he was prepared to die. Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. And today we have the opportunity to give thought to what has been essential to every religious tradition. Common to every faith is the conviction that if we are to know how to live, we must also know how to die. Such readiness always occurs on at least two levels: the practical arrangements, the physical level, which must inevitably be dealt with, and the spiritual response, the time of loss and of those who are to survive a loss. There is, in other words, what surrounds the funeral or the memorial service, and then what's associated with the ongoing process of grief and healing. To us who work through both aspects of this preparation within the religious community, we are pleased to have two resource persons: the Reverend Janice Smith, chaplain of Hospice Austin, a service organization which is available to those who are terminally ill and to their families. We're also privileged to have Frank Wright, president of the Austin Memorial and Burial Information Society, known also as AMBIS. This is a group that counsels with people who are about to make arrangements at the time of death. We welcome you both. And it just occurs to me, Frank, it's not just close to the time of death, but more further in advance that your organization is at work. Is that correct?
Yes, AMBIS is really interested in encouraging people to know what the alternatives may be in advance and decide which kinds of things would be most meaningful and suitable for that individual, meaning my own, so that I can plan what I would like to have happen and then share that with my family and my loved ones and my doctor, my lawyer, my minister, and thus have that whole community know and participate in the kinds of observances and other events that are in keeping with the life that we are seeking to celebrate.
Okay, I'd like to have us come back to that in terms of the particular kinds of services that you offer. And I think, Janice, if you would at this time tell us exactly what it is that Hospice Austin offers.
We're a nonprofit organization, a group of people that are committed to helping folks die with dignity and comfortable in their homes or inpatient facilities. We service a 4-county area, and we help folks do what Frank's talking about, to live fully until they die comfortably without a lot of pain.
All right.
With their pain controlled.
And it's something that I associate with the Middle Ages. I mean, there were the Crusaders that went to from Europe to the Holy Land, and they were helped along the way. Could you give us a little bit of background of how this came about?
It's a hospitable hospitality. I see it as a wayfarers, travelers' place of rest for the weary, and came up through the Middle Ages for Crusaders and leper all the way up. And then Cicely Saunders in England started in like the 50s and 60s, really focusing on pain control and the modern hospice movement.
Now, Cicely Saunders was from where?
She's England. From where? She's England.
Still living?
Yeah, yeah. She's still a living. Yeah, she sure is. Dame Cicely Saunders.
And she was the founder of the modern movement of hospice. And how that's come down to us and over to the States and so on, let's come back to that. And I know that, Frank, the Memorial Society has a bit of a background and past that our viewers may not be aware of. Could you share with us on that?
Well, as a matter of fact, we're right now in our 25th year here in Austin. We're associated with the Continental Memorial Societies, which is officed in Washington, but includes Washington, D.C., but includes memorial societies in Canada and the United States scattered all over. So that this is a movement that's been fairly active for in the neighborhood of 50 years, always seeking to have people do advanced thinking and planning with regard to what they wish to have happen at death, rather than to have the surviving persons pressed at a last minute to do under grief and very poor circumstances to then decide what they want to have happen.
Okay, so this coming back to the thought of giving advanced thought to final arrangements, and I think that as I understand from books like Jessica Mitford's The American Way of Death, there's an economic aspect to it that people need to know that they have a choice as to how much they need to pay at a time of death within a family. How do you translate that in the local area too?
Well, Ambus doesn't have a position on what any family or individual should do about preparation for death. We do have a very strong conviction that one ought to know what the alternatives are in order that the decision can be holistic with that individual and that family and those survivors, so that we try to supply full information to our members about earth burial, about cremation, and about donation of body or body parts. Those are the three essential alternatives that are available to any individual. We also supply information about Hospice Austin and about the Natural Death Act, and have recently dealt with the other means of taking care of death shortly before death, because that has become, with modern medical developments, a very, very serious problem. So we try to give this kind of information to everybody. Now, you ask about the economic aspects. Included then in what we supply to our members is the information about the costs and services of various kinds of activities that might be carried on by a funeral establishment in the Central Texas area.
I see. So that people would have a basis of making some comparison on the cost.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to come back to the way in which you refer folks to the hospice service, and we identify this as with persons who are terminally ill or with families of those who are in that condition. And what can you do under that extreme circumstance?
To control pain.
Is that the focal point of it?
The focal point is so folks can be comfortable and can be given quality care so that they can die as they want to die, with however they want to do that. So their pain can be controlled, and we see their pain being controlling it physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially.
All right. So it's more than just a physical pain control.
Yes, it is more than just physical pain control.
Okay.
Although that has to be done first usually.
And so you have physicians, nurses
and nurses that we have an interdisciplinary team that addresses all those areas of pain to help control it. Social worker, chaplains, aides, volunteers.
You know, one of the things, and I just have to pause for a moment as a pastor of a church to reflect upon the change that's occurred in the last 25 years or so since the memorial societies have come into public notice, and hospice as well, that there was a time, and a quarter century ago wouldn't have been that long ago, when talking about the issue of preparing to die would have been taboo. That it would have been like, it's almost like the attitude of talking about sex at one time. You just didn't do it. And that what's happened, there's been a whole transformation of consciousness about that it's okay. In fact, it's important, it's vital to give adequate forethought to what kind of arrangements that are made and what kind of spiritual reconciliation is necessary under that. And it just dawned on me as we were interchanging here, that's been a kind of tidal wave of change. Have you felt that?
Yes, very definitely. It has been. I often start my talks that I get a chance to make about AMBUS with saying that we're going to talk this evening about a topic nobody tends to talk about, but that everyone who has ever lived experiences, death. And there is a much greater interest and willingness to, and eagerness in a way, to talk about death as a part of life. One of our annual meetings, the last one in fact, was entitled Surviving Death, at which we had Chaplain Chuck Meyer talk with us about surviving death. And I think there's a great deal of interest in this, and our interest is having that experience brought back into the family and the church, where dignity and simplicity can really characterize the experience. Whereas we had a period of time in which we seemingly wanted to pretend we could escape from death, and so we put it off into the professionals' hands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, back in the old westerns, the family and the church handled the death, but then there came this mortuary into the picture. That's fairly recent, and I believe what's happening now is a re-immersion into the desire to have death recognized as a part of life and therefore embraced in the church and the family.
Mm-hmm. Taken more naturally and taking responsibility for it within the family.
Right.
All right.
Now,
Now,
hospice allows
Same
that
thing.
to happen.
okay, how
Because
is that similar in hospice?
Well, we allow folks to die at home if that's what
Which
they
is
choose to
wonderful.
do,
Okay.
with dignity and how they want to in their own home. That's what we go into their homes, so that's what it's exactly what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now when you go into the home, you're called in. Someone hears about hospice and knows that there is a potential, if not actual, circumstance that would call for your services.
The physicians usually refer,
Or the doctors
or
do that?
or
Oh,
social workers, and some folks to call in.
okay, and who comes in first? And just lay it out for us as to what happens as you...
The registered nurse, our admitting nurse, goes to the family and talks about, tells what we're about, and the family decides if they want to become affiliated with hospice, want to sign up with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our whole team invites our presence into their home if they'd like us, depending on their needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll call as the chaplain, and the social worker will call and just say, can we come in and see? How can we help you meet your needs?
Okay.
And that's kind of where we focus, is they tell us what their needs are, and we try to help them meet them.
Okay, now, Chaplain Smith, your need, or the need that you address yourself to, the spiritual need.
Right.
Can you define that a little bit more specifically for us?
Well, in hospice, spiritual is seen as something that's much broader. There's difference between spiritual and religious.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
How would you distinguish?
Spiritual, we're all spiritual. We all have the breath of life, spirit, animating force within us, what gives us meaning,
Mm-hmm.
where the light is within us. Some of us, like myself and you and Frank, are in institutional or in rituals and faith communities and practices, have beliefs that are ritualized in religion. But in hospice, I go in and help folks meet their spiritual and or religious needs.
All right, so you're ready to deal with people who may have no church connection.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay, but you as a chaplain, how do you make contact with them in that regard? What do you speak to in their need, meaning and hope?
Meaning and hope. If they're wanting to see me, then I go in and try to help them. I ask some of the questions I try to help them find where the meaning is in their life if they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or we talk about where the meaning is in their life, where the light is. And if there's a lot of darkness and a lot of despair, then I empathize and I am just with them in it. As any good spiritual caregiver does, enter their world and respond with feeling, with love, and that's kind of what good spiritual care is, as you know. So that's what I help people do.
The doctor tells me I have 6 months to live. What meaning is, you're saying that there's a hope, there's meaning that can be given to me even in that short time when I know it's so...
No, I don't give it to you.
Okay.
I don't give you the hope, but I come in and I am with you while you try to sort together is what your life means, where has been your meaning, what is your meaning now, where is your hope?
All right, and it may be that
Where's
that
the
I will
light in your life?
I will discover something as a result of my conversation with you that I wouldn't just on my own.
Well, it's real helpful. We need somebody else to listen to us and to be able to tell our story. And in the telling of our story, a lot of times it changes so that we can say, oh yeah, that, we receive forgiveness. We feel reconciled. We feel accepted by somebody else. If we say the confession, those things. So having a presence there and a mediator sometimes, it depends.
Okay. I think that's helpful to have had you share just a little bit of the kind of relationship that you have with people. It's not just a professional, bureaucratic type of thing. I mean, it's the most intimate, the most personal sort of communion that you could have.
Well, we care about our people.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Frank, and it seems like a contrast between this the spiritual interchange that Janice was just describing and the service that you offer in terms of, well, now here are comparisons of prices between, funeral services, or here are the ways that you can donate your body or have cremation or whatever. It seems like you're zeroed in on the physical arrangements side. But I also discern a little bit from what you were saying before that you don't see it just as an external kind of service. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so at all, because if you get those essentially physical things out of the way, that is to say arranged and known, what you plan to have happen, then indeed the relationship with others and even with yourself and your God, I'm sure, can be more at the level that Janice is talking about. The problem with these, what you're terming physical arrangements, is that they have a way, if you haven't paid any attention to them, of tripping you up so that that's all you can concentrate on at a time when it is good for the human spirit to be concentrating elsewhere. And therefore these arrangements at death are freeing to do the kind of thing that Janice is talking about at all levels, and at all ages, so that there's a way in which handling these essentially mechanistic arrangements is freeing for the spirit.
Okay. So you just can't draw a sharp line between the one and the other.
No, I don't think so.
Well, let's do a little bit of what we've done with her as far as what an individual calling you or calling your service could expect to have happen. How you could respond to them, just from the beginning to the end kind of process.
Well, our name says information service, and therefore our major task is to supply people with the information. We do not favor one or another decision. We just feel that they ought to have
to provide the alternatives
in mind. And then when a person joins, we send them all of this information, including a very beautifully published, nationally published book on dignity and death. And then we provide them with forms on which they may record their decisions and share them with the next of kin and ministers and lawyers and doctors and whomever. And we also encourage them to think about the Natural Death Act. We have a Texas Natural Death Act, sometimes called a living will, a directive to physicians about the kind of care that you wish to have at the time when it is pretty clear that death is imminent. And then we encourage them also to think about and supply them with information about Hospice Austin, because again, we think that for many, it will be so much more meaningful for the person dying, but certainly for those who remain, if that death takes place among friends and family at home, instead of in some sterile emergency room with all kinds of things plugged into you and sustaining at least existence. So we encourage people to know about these and use them. And then, once that's been done, we also have, this is especially in this nationally published book, good many thoughts about memorial services. There are even some suggestions of things that various people have used in memorial services. And so we encourage them even to go on and think about what would you like to have in a memorial service. We tend to talk about memorial services more than funerals because there's a tendency not to concentrate on the body.
Okay, that's the difference that you would make between a memorial service and a funeral.
Pretty much so. A funeral doesn't need to, but most often the funeral, traditional funeral, concentrates upon the body, and most memorial services do not concentrate upon that, but concentrate upon the life that has been and that has gone from us.
I know Janice is a pastor that is now working with hospice, but that you've had experiences within the local church as well. I'd be interested to compare just an experience or two with you here. I've found that over the years that to let people know that there's an alternative to, for instance, having a visitation one night and a service the next day followed by a burial, that there's a different way that you can do that. And one of the most meaningful ways is to have a memorial service at the church and what would be like a reception afterwards that would take the place of a wake, in which people can right on the site go and be with the family and offer their support. And sometimes you can have people that we can come for at night or at a time other than during the working day, that they can be there in some numbers, and that leaves the immediate family, if there is an interment, to be at the graveside, you know, either beforehand or sometime afterwards, but to give the emphasis to that interchange between the family and the people that care about them. And the body usually under those circumstances isn't even there. Do you feel that that has a therapeutic or a healing dimension to it? In what way?
Well, that helps people with their grief to be able to receive from each other and give to each other. It's part of the healing process, the grief process, I think. It makes a lot of sense to me to do that.
Now, there is some thought that to have the body there, to have the remains of the person there, is helpful to come to terms with the reality this person is gone. And that the essence of grief, if we think of grief as that distinction between the emotional presence that is still there and the physical absence and the tension or the pain that results as a result of that dichotomy, that somehow to have the body present is bringing home, or to see the body dropped into the ground at a burial is necessary for that. Do you feel that that's the case, that it's necessary?
I personally feel that that's one of the great things about hospice. Then the departure is known because you've participated in it over a period of time. I personally don't feel that the seeing the dead body in a kind of false contrived situation is nearly as important as having participated in the letting go and the renewal of the new lives, so that I think that to some extent I really feel that the concentration on the body, if it has to be, is because of failure to relate to each other in advance.
I think it depends on the people. Let the people, that's the pastoral thing to do. Let them decide.
And for some,
that's, you're absolutely right. And for others, you know, they need that. They need to have the body there, and that's okay.
Okay, well, I think that we need at this time to express our appreciation to you folks for letting us have the benefit of your insight, and having given this advanced thought to what happens at life's end, we find ourselves in concluding wanting to say thanks to Janice Smith of Hospice Austin and to Frank Wright of the Austin Memorial and Burial Society. We trust that you, as our viewers, have benefited from how best to be ready for what is not only inevitable, but for what is an occasion for learning to live more deeply and faithfully. I'm Richard Thompson, thanking you for watching, and peace be with you.